youngest prime ministers on the subject of social media, Prime Minister Dr. Terrance Drew and the Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell of Grenada as our two youngest prime ministers, who probably speak the language in social media better than any of us do. Dr. Drew.
I think I can be heard. Thank you very, very much. There's another caveat here. I think I'm the only trained medical doctor among the heads. And not to shift away from what you have asked, but I have studied this extensively in my years of study. One of the doctors that I studied with was Dr. Frank Irvin, who is a behavioralist, he's passed, and a neurologist. And I spent some time with him studying behavior. He was from Harvard University and associated with San Antonio, University of Texas, San Antonio. And one day we were studying primates and their behavior. He's a white man, I'm a black, young, aspiring doctor. And the issue of crime and violence came up, and the issue of whether genetics had anything to do with it came up as well, for particular reasons. And he said this to me. When he was studying, he went to the prisons of Boston, and he examined, as part of his research, the criminals. They were disproportionately minorities, black people. And he told me what he recognized is that many of them had illnesses that could have been diagnosed and treated. He said up to 30-something%. And so that drew me into what he was leading me to, is to crime as a public health matter. And so I started to look at it from that perspective. I went further. We did 3 things. I experimented, went to my community, started a youth group, basketball and football, and accounted for all the young men. And we were able to avert the establishment of gangs in the community. Quite interesting. But even from a medical perspective, when I hear public health, I'm thinking evidence-based. That we are not just going to throw all these niceties and they sound good and you're well trained. But the question becomes, at the end of doing all of this, show me the evidence that there was a decrease in crime. In medicine, if you have a person with a disease and you bring a tablet and it costs $1,000 and one costs $1, and the one that costs $1 is resolving your problem and the one that costs $1,000 is not resolving your problem, the evidence is the one that costs $1 is effective. And therefore, it means that evidence-based approach gives us an opportunity to really solve the problem. And I feel very optimistic, because when I study the data, and I look at it even from my perspective as a professional, I am very hopeful, because this actually has a solution. What has happened, and I look at the Caribbean context, is that we did well when it came to HIV. HIV was doom and gloom, and as a region, we implemented an HIV action plan, and it resulted in good results. Right now, we are dealing with NCDs, and we are implementing a good action plan. What I think, and where we would have failed as a region, and that is why I want to applaud the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Prime Minister Rowley, is that he has come, in my own opinion, to bring us together to really attack crime and violence, not only at the root, but based on evidence and scientific data. And with that approach, I am very, very optimistic, and some of which I'll mention in my presentation later. But from the social media perspective, I agree with the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Prime Minister Holness, when he said that social media is being used as a means to transmit violence. We heard about the COVID virus, and it's transmitted if you cough, if you touch here and you touch there, it's transmitted. Violence can also be transmitted. And so one of the effective ways of transmitting violence, I'm just using what he said and putting it in medical terms, is that social media can become an excellent conduit to transmit violence, and people are using it. People learn different tactics, ideas. How do you use social media to gather information? How do you use social media to reach those who are susceptible? Because here you have an agent, which is violence, and those who are the repository of violence. Here you have susceptible persons in the community for different reasons, family problems, trauma when they're young. And all you need now is to transmit the agent, which is the violence, to the susceptible, and social media is giving you a great medium in which to transmit the violence from here to over here to the susceptibles who are probably using their phone, the tablet, on Facebook, and so forth. So how do we chop that transmission is a great question. So I would support the idea that social media can be misused and abused and become a medium of transmission of violence from a host to a susceptible. And that medium, I think, we have not dealt with, and we need to deal with it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Drew, for that very compelling contribution. And I genuinely, and I think everybody appreciates the experience that you've brought to bear from your medical and public health perspective.